When I returned from visiting my late wife's parents and found Bella's empty bed, my daughter-in-law's words cut deeper than the anxiety from realizing something important was missing. Why keep that stinking mutt? The house finally smells clean. 3 years I'd sheltered them under my roof after my son's failures left them homeless. 3 years of grateful smiles that masked their calculations. But as I stood in my sanitized living room, something shifted in the silence where Bella's gentle snoring used to be. They wanted clean? I'd show them what a real deep clean looks like. Before we continue, please subscribe to stay updated on our latest stories. The highway stretched ahead of me like a gray ribbon, and I found myself gripping the steering wheel tighter than necessary. 3 hours driving back from Abigail's parents, 3 hours of sitting in their dimly lit living room while her father struggled through another story about his late daughter. They'd called me that morning, her mother's voice shaky on the phone. Grant, we're finally ready to go through her things from the attic. Would you like to take anything before we donate it all? Abigail. Even now, 3 years after the cancer took her, I could still hear her laugh echoing in my mind. She'd been so small toward the end, disappearing into our king-size bed like a child. But her spirit, God, her spirit had burned bright right until the last breath. I remembered the day we brought Bella home, just 8 weeks old and trembling in Abigail's gentle hands. She needs a friend, Abigail had said, her voice already getting that thin quality that would haunt our last months together. You work so hard, honey. 60-hour weeks, overtime, those weekend shifts at the plant. I get so lonely. Her eyes had that distant look they got when she was trying not to burden me with her fears, her pain, her growing certainty that time was running short. But Bella had been perfect. A golden retriever mix with soulful brown eyes that seemed to understand everything. While I pulled doubles to keep up with medical bills and mortgage payments, while I fought with insurance companies and researched experimental treatments, Bella stayed curled against Abigail's side. Through chemo sessions and sleepless nights, through the small victories and crushing setbacks, that dog had been Abigail's constant companion. I could still picture them together, Abigail's bald head resting against Bella's fur, both of them napping in the afternoon sun that streamed through our bedroom window. She knows. Abigail had told me one evening, scratching behind Bella's ears. Dogs always know. She's taking such good care of me. After Abigail passed, Bella had been my lifeline too. The house felt like a mausoleum without Abigail's laughter, but Bella's presence made it bearable. Her routine kept me grounded. Morning walks, evening meals, the way she'd rest her head on my lap while I sat in Abigail's chair, staring at old photographs. Then came Eric's call 2 years later. My son, my pride and joy, voice careful and measured. Dad, I'm having some difficulties right now. Could we stay with you for a while? Just until things turn around. What kind of father says no to that? I'd opened my doors, rearranged my life, turned Abigail's craft room into a nursery, and given them the master bedroom. 3 years of supporting his dreams, 3 years of Josie's grateful smiles and Eric's promises to get back on his feet. The familiar turn onto Maple Street snapped me back to the present. My modest 2-story house came into view, its blue shutters and white picket fence looking picture perfect in the afternoon light. I pulled into the driveway, noting Josie's car was still there, Eric's truck parked beside it. But something felt wrong. Usually, by the time I'd cut the engine, Bella would be at the front window, tail wagging, that distinctive golden blur of excitement. I gathered my overnight bag from the passenger seat, walked up the front path I'd repaved just last spring with my own sweat and savings. I paused at the front door, key halfway to the lock. The silence was absolute. No excited barking, no scrambling paws against hardwood, no wet nose pressed against the glass, just nothing. The key turned with its familiar click, and I stepped into my own home. The air felt different somehow, too clean, too sterile, missing that warm doggy scent that had greeted me for the past 3 years. Hello? I called out, setting my overnight bag by the door. Eric? Josie? I'm back! My voice echoed through the house, bouncing off walls that seemed to absorb sound differently than I remembered. Bella? Here, girl. I waited for the thunder of paws on hardwood, that joyful scramble that always made coming home worthwhile. Instead, footsteps descended the stairs, light, measured, irritated. Josie appeared at the bottom of the staircase, her blonde hair pulled back in a neat ponytail, wearing one of those expensive yoga outfits I'd helped pay for. She pressed a finger to her lips with an exaggerated shushing motion. "Grant, please don't shout," she whispered, though her tone carried that edge of authority she'd been developing lately. "Liam just went down for his nap, and you know how cranky he gets when his schedule gets disrupted." I know how cranky you get, I thought, but forced an apologetic smile instead. "Sorry, sweetheart. I was just looking for Bella. Where is she?" Josie's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind her eyes, a preparedness, like she'd rehearsed this moment. "Oh, we took her to the shelter this morning." She said it the way someone might mention picking up groceries or dropping off dry cleaning, casual and matter of fact. The words landed like ice water in my veins. My throat tightened, and for a moment, I wasn't sure I'd heard her correctly. "You? What? The shelter?" "Well, yes." Josie crossed her arms, settling into that patient tone she used when explaining obvious things to slow people. "Liam's getting bigger now, more mobile, and that dog was constantly getting in his way. Hair everywhere, muddy paw prints, knocking over his toys. The house was always such a mess." Mess. I looked around my spotless living room, at the white furniture that had replaced Abigail's warm, lived-in pieces, at the sanitized space where my grandson's laughter should echo but rarely did. "Josie, how could you even imagine you had the right to make that decision? Bella wasn't just a pet, she was family." Her laugh was light, dismissive. "Grant, we are your family. She was just a dog." Heavy footsteps on the stairs announced Eric's arrival. My son, tall, broad-shouldered like me, but with his mother's gentle eyes, looked between us with that expression I'd been seeing too often lately, the one that said he'd already chosen sides. "Dad, she's right," he said, and his words felt like another punch. "I mean, it was just a dog. We have a baby to think about now." Just a dog. I felt something hot and sharp rising in my chest, but I kept my voice level. "That dog meant everything to me. She was your mother's companion through her illness, her last gift to this family. You had no right, neither of you, to make that decision without me." Josie's patience evaporated, and I saw the real woman underneath the grateful smiles and sweet daughter-in-law act. Why keep that stinking mutt? The house finally smells clean. The silence that followed was absolute. I could hear my own heartbeat, could feel the blood rushing in my ears. Over a year of sacrifice, over a year of opening my home and my heart, and this was how they saw Abigail's memory. This was how they saw me. My hands clenched into fists at my sides, but I kept them there, kept my voice steady, even though every muscle in my body screamed for action. "Which shelter?" I asked quietly. "What?" Josie blinked, caught off guard by the question. "Which shelter did you take her to?" Eric and Josie exchanged glances. "Dad, I don't think," Eric started. "Which shelter?" My voice was still calm, but something in it made both of them straighten. The county animal shelter on Riverside Drive," Josie said reluctantly. I nodded once, turned, and headed for the stairs. "Grant, wait," Josie called after me. I paused on the third step, looked back at them both. "When I return, we're going to have a very unpleasant conversation." The engine turned over with a familiar rumble, and I sat for a moment in my driveway, hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. Through the rearview mirror, I could see the house, my house, with its pristine windows and perfectly manicured lawn. Everything looked so normal, so peaceful, like a lie wrapped in suburban respectability. 30 minutes to the county shelter on Riverside Drive. 30 minutes to think about what had just happened, what it meant, and what I was going to do about it. I pulled out of the driveway and headed toward the main road, my mind spinning like a car engine in neutral. Bella. Sweet, loyal Bella, who had never asked for anything more than food, water, and the chance to love us unconditionally. The dog who had licked Abigail's tears during those endless chemo sessions, who had laid her head on my lap during the long, empty nights after the funeral, who had been my anchor when the world felt like it was dissolving beneath my feet. They threw her away like garbage. The thought hit me with such clarity it was almost physical. Not rehomed, not carefully placed with a loving family, dumped at a county shelter where overcrowding meant... I couldn't finish that line of thinking. Not yet. I turned onto Highway 52, the same road I'd driven just hours ago, full of bittersweet memories of Abigail's parents and their shaky hands sorting through her old sweaters. How different this drive felt now. How different everything felt. Over a year, I'd supported them. Over a year of Eric's promises that things would turn around soon, that this was just temporary, that they were grateful beyond words for my generosity. Josie's sweet smiles over breakfast, her careful compliments about the house, the way she'd defer to me on major decisions, or pretend to anyway. But today, with me gone for less than 12 hours, they'd made the biggest decision of all. Without a phone call, without a conversation, without even the basic courtesy of asking my opinion about my own dog in my own house. The highway stretched ahead, and I found myself pressing the accelerator harder. Bella had been more than a pet. She'd been the last living piece of my marriage, the final gift Abigail and I had chosen together. When Josie said the house finally smells clean, she might as well have spat on my wife's grave. They think I'm weak, I realized. They think I'm some old fool who'll absorb any insult, accept any disrespect, as long as they keep letting me play grandfather to Liam. The thought should have hurt, but instead, it felt like cold water clearing fog from my brain. How long had they been testing boundaries? How many small cruelties had I overlooked? How many little liberties had I allowed, telling myself it was just adjustment, just stress, just the natural friction of 3 generations under one roof? The county animal shelter sat at the end of a long gravel drive, a low brick building surrounded by chain link runs where I could already hear dogs barking. My heart clenched as I parked. Somewhere in there was Bella, probably terrified, probably wondering why her family had abandoned her. The lobby smelled like disinfectant and wet fur. A tired-looking woman in her 50s looked up from behind the counter, her expression shifting from bureaucratic indifference to cautious concern when she saw my face. "Can I help you?" "Yes." I pulled out my wallet, found the photo I'd carried for years. Abigail and me from our last Christmas together. Bella just a puppy sitting between us wearing a ridiculous red Santa hat that my wife had insisted on. All 3 of us were happy then. Abigail was still fighting, still hopeful. A young woman brought in my dog this morning, golden retriever mix, about 5 years old. The woman's eyebrows rose as she looked at the photo, then back at my face. "Sir," the person who brought her in said she was homeless, that she'd been wandering the neighborhood. What exactly happened here? That's not true. My voice was steady, but I could hear steel creeping into it. "That's my dog. Her name is Bella. This is my house. This is my wife. And that woman had no right to bring her here. It's my daughter-in-law's idea of humor, apparently." The woman studied the photo more carefully, and I saw the exact moment she understood what had happened. Her expression softened, and she shook her head slightly. "Oh, honey, let me get my supervisor." 20 minutes later, I was walking through the kennels, following the sound of a familiar whine. And there she was, huddled in the back corner of her cage, head down, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. When she saw me, her ears perked up cautiously, like she wasn't sure if this was real or just another cruel trick. "Hey, girl," I whispered, and my voice nearly broke. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." The kennel door opened, and slowly, hesitantly, Bella approached. She'd been scared, abandoned by the only family she'd known since puppyhood, and it showed in every careful step. But when she finally reached me, she launched herself into my arms, all 60 pounds of golden fur in desperate relief. She was trembling, licking my face, making those soft huffing sounds she always made when she was overwhelmed. I buried my face in her neck, breathing in that familiar scent, feeling her solid warmth against my chest. "It's okay," I murmured. "You're coming home. You're coming home with me." But as I signed the paperwork and walked her to the car, one thought kept echoing in my mind. They're going to pay for this. Bella settled into the passenger seat like she'd never left, looking at me with such trust, such forgiveness, that it nearly undid me. I started the engine and pulled out of the shelter parking lot, heading home. 30 minutes to figure out exactly how I was going to make them understand what they'd done. 30 minutes to plan my next move. For the first time in over a year, I felt completely crystalline clear about what needed to happen next. Even before I reached the front door, I could hear Josie's voice carrying through the walls, sharp with irritation. I can't believe he went and got that mutt back. After everything we explained to him, does he want Liam getting hurt? Does he want dog hair all over everything again? Eric's voice was quieter, mumbling something I couldn't make out, but I caught the defensive tone. I unlocked the door and stepped inside with Bella at my side. She stayed close to me, still uncertain, still processing her abandonment and rescue. Her warm presence against my leg was the only thing keeping me calm. Eric, Josie. My voice carried through the house with quiet authority. Living room. Now. I heard their conversation stop abruptly, followed by the shuffle of reluctant footsteps. They appeared in the doorway looking like children called to the principal's office. Eric with his hands shoved deep in his pockets, Josie with her arms crossed defensively. Grant, we need to talk about this rationally, Josie began. Sit down. I didn't raise my voice, but something in my tone made them both settle onto the couch without another word. Bella curled up at my feet, her familiar weight a comforting anchor. I looked at my son, really looked at him, searching for any trace of the boy I'd raised, the young man who used to help me brush Bella during Abigail's worst days, who'd held my hand at his mother's funeral while this dog pressed against both our legs in shared grief. Eric, I said quietly, I can understand your wife making this decision. She didn't know your mother. She wasn't here during the treatments, during the final months. She doesn't understand what this dog represents. Eric shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting between me and Josie. But you? I leaned forward, and I felt something cold and disappointed settling in my chest. You know exactly what Bella meant to your mother. You know what she means to me. You watched your wife drive to that shelter this morning, and you said nothing. How could you let this happen? Dad, Eric started, his voice weak and uncertain. We were thinking of what's best for everyone. Josie interrupted, her voice rising with indignation. A baby and a big dog don't mix. Liam could get knocked down or bitten or... Bella has never shown aggression toward anyone in her life, I said calmly. She lived with your son for his first year without incident. That's not the point, Josie shot back. The point is we're trying to create a safe, clean environment for our family. We're not the villains here, Grant. We just want what's best. I stood up slowly, feeling Bella rise with me, sensing the shift in energy. You want what's best, I repeated, tasting the words. How thoughtful of you. Eric was fidgeting now, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of this conversation. Dad, maybe we can work something out? No, I interrupted, holding up a hand. Josie's right. You both want what's best. And you know what? So do I. I walked to the window, looking out at the yard I'd maintained, the fence I'd repaired, the garden Abigail had planted that I still tended in her memory. I've been thinking during my drive home, really thinking about what's best for everyone. I turned back to face them, and I saw Josie's confident expression falter slightly. It seems to me that your family has, how should I put this, outgrown my hospitality. You've become comfortable enough in my home to make major decisions without consulting me, comfortable enough to dispose of something precious to me like it was garbage. Dad, Eric started, if you can so casually disregard my values, my feelings, my authority in my own house, I continued, my voice remaining perfectly level, then perhaps you've both decided you don't need to live under my rules anymore. The silence that followed was deafening. I could see the understanding dawning in their eyes, the realization that their comfortable arrangement might not be as secure as they'd assumed. Maybe it's time for you to find your own place, I said simply. Somewhere you can make all the decisions you want without having to consider anyone else's feelings. Josie's face had gone pale. You can't be serious. Oh, I'm very serious. I sat back down, and Bella immediately rested her head on my knee. You wanted what's best. This seems like what's best for everyone, don't you think? The color drained from Josie's face, but Eric straightened up, that familiar stubborn set to his jaw I remembered from his teenage years. Dad, you can't be serious about kicking us out, he said, his voice gaining strength. We can't just move out right now. Things are still complicated for us financially. We need more time. Josie nodded vigorously, her shock giving way to indignation. We have a baby, Grant. You can't just throw a family with a 1-year-old onto the street because you're having some emotional breakdown over a dog. Emotional breakdown? I repeated quietly. Yes. Josie's voice rose, all pretense of sweetness evaporating. You're acting completely irrational about this whole thing. We made a practical decision for the good of everyone in this house, and you're treating us like criminals. Eric stepped forward, his face flushed. She's right, Dad. You're being totally unreasonable. We're your family. We're trying to build something here, and you're sabotaging it over a damn animal. I held up a hand, feeling something cold settle over me like a familiar coat. Wait, I said simply. I turned and walked into the kitchen, their voices following me, but growing muffled as I focused on the simple ritual ahead. The bottle of Glenfiddich 21 sat on the high shelf where I'd kept it since Abigail's last birthday. The good stuff, saved for special occasions. This felt special enough. The crystal tumbler caught the light as I poured 2 fingers of amber liquid, the familiar aroma of spiced caramel with tropical notes rising to meet me. I took a slow sip, letting the complex flavors spread across my tongue, feeling my shoulders relax for the first time all day. Yes, I thought. This helps. I walked back to the living room, cradling the glass, watching as Eric and Josie tracked my movement with wary eyes. Bella looked up at me from her spot on the carpet, tail giving a tentative wag. Much better, I said, taking another appreciative sip. Now let me ask you something. I settled back into my chair, the whiskey glass balanced perfectly on the armrest. When was the last time either of you paid for anything in this house besides your own groceries? Eric's mouth opened, then closed. I mean anything, I continued conversationally. Electric bill, water, gas, internet that you both use constantly, property taxes, home insurance. The silence stretched between us. Josie glanced at Eric, who was staring at the floor. Your naivety astounds me, I said, savoring both the whiskey and the words. The sheer audacity of considering your behavior normal. You strut around here like you're a young family making it on your own, but when exactly have you demonstrated any actual independence? Dad, Eric started. And another thing that's been bothering me, I interrupted, swirling the whiskey gently. You both seem so concerned about Liam's safety around Bella. So protective, so vigilant. I took another sip. Where exactly is my grandson right now? Eric's head snapped up. What? Liam, your 1-year-old son, the child you're so worried about protecting from a 60-pound golden retriever. Where is he? I watched the realization dawn on their faces. He's upstairs, napping, Josie said, but her voice had lost its conviction. And when did you last check on him? This conversation started, what, an hour ago? Hour and a half? I tilted my head thoughtfully. But please, don't let me interrupt your parenting lecture. Eric's face flushed red. You don't get to tell us how to parent, Dad. You don't get to imply... I'm not implying anything, I said calmly, taking another slow sip. I'm observing. You've been down here for over an hour, arguing about how dangerous it is for a baby to be around a dog, while that same baby has been alone upstairs the entire time. Josie shot to her feet. How dare you suggest? I'm not suggesting anything. I repeated, my voice remaining perfectly level. I'm simply pointing out the irony. Josie's face went through several shades of red before she spun on her heel and stormed toward the stairs. I'm going to check on him right now, she snapped over her shoulder. Eric stood there, hands clenched at his sides, looking like he wanted to say something, but couldn't find the words. I raised my glass slightly in his direction. Excellent whiskey, I said conversationally. Really helps one see things clearly. The doorbell rang just as Eric opened his mouth to respond, its sharp chime cutting through the tension like a knife. We all froze. Eric with his mouth half open, me with the whiskey glass halfway to my lips, even Bella's ears perking up from her spot on the carpet. 3 more rings in quick succession, followed by a firm knock that spoke of official business. I stood slowly, enjoying the confused panic that flickered across Eric's face. I wonder who that could be, I said mildly, setting my glass down with deliberate care. Through the front window, I could see 2 uniformed police officers and a woman in a khaki jacket with Animal Control Services embroidered across the back. My heart did a little skip of satisfaction. Dad? Eric started, but I was already moving toward the door. Please come in, I said, opening the door wide and stepping back. I assume this is about the incident at the county shelter this morning? The older police officer, a gray-haired man with kind eyes, nodded. Mr. Patterson? I'm Officer Bradley, this is Officer Williams, and this is Karen Mitchell from Animal Control. We received a report from the county shelter about a possible false surrender. They mentioned you retrieved your dog and indicated there might have been some confusion about the circumstances. No confusion on my part? I said clearly. Please come in. Feel free to ask any questions you need to ask. They stepped into my living room, and I watched Eric's face go 3 shades paler as he took in the uniforms, the official clipboards, the woman from animal control who was looking around the room with professional interest. Is there somewhere we can sit down and discuss this? Officer Bradley asked. Of course. Eric, would you mind calling Josie down here? I think the officers would like to speak with everyone involved. Eric looked like he wanted to disappear through the floor. Dad, maybe we should. Eric, I said firmly, call your wife. The sound of footsteps on the stairs saved him from having to respond. Josie appeared, Liam balanced on her hip, her hair slightly disheveled and her expression shifting from confusion to alarm as she took in the scene. What's going on? She asked, her voice tight. Eric, why are the police here? Officer Williams, a young woman with sharp eyes, consulted her notepad. Ma'am, are you Josie Patterson? Yes, but I don't understand. Ma'am, we're investigating a report of false information provided to the county animal shelter this morning. You surrendered a golden retriever mix, claiming it was a stray animal. Is that correct? I watched Josie's face go through a remarkable transformation, confusion, realization, panic, then a desperate attempt at innocence. Oh, that, she said, forcing a laugh that sounded hollow in the suddenly quiet room. It was a silly misunderstanding. A joke, really. A joke? The animal control officer, Karen Mitchell, looked up from her clipboard with raised eyebrows. Ma'am, can you walk us through exactly what happened this morning? Josie glanced frantically between Eric and me. Well, the dog was it was causing problems with our baby, and I thought, Mrs. Patterson, Officer Bradley interrupted gently, let's start from the beginning. Whose dog is this? It's mine, I said clearly. Bella has lived in this house for 5 years. She belonged to my late wife and me. Officer Williams made a note. And Mrs. Patterson, what's your relationship to Mr. Patterson? I'm his daughter-in-law. We live here with him. I see. And this morning you took Mr. Patterson's dog to the county shelter? Yes, and what did you tell the shelter staff when you brought the dog in? Josie's voice became very small. I said she was a stray I found. Why did you tell them that instead of the truth? The silence stretched uncomfortably. Eric shifted from foot to foot, looking like he wanted to disappear. Mrs. Patterson? Officer Bradley prompted. I thought it would be easier, Josie whispered. Easier than what? Than explaining that we didn't want the dog anymore. Karen Mitchell looked up from her notes. So to be clear, you knowingly provided false information to municipal animal control staff? It wasn't supposed to be a big deal, Josie said desperately. I just thought, Mr. Patterson, Officer Williams turned to me. Were you aware your daughter-in-law was planning to take your dog to the shelter? No. I was visiting my late wife's parents. I came home this evening to find Bella missing. And what did Mrs. Patterson tell you when you asked about the dog? I took a slow sip of my whiskey before responding. She said they had taken Bella to the shelter because the house was always messy with a dog around. She said, and I quote, "Why keep that stinking mutt? The house finally smells clean." The officers exchanged glances. Officer Bradley made another note. Mrs. Patterson, is that an accurate account of what you said? Josie's face went from pale to bright red. I didn't mean it like that. I was just trying to explain. Ma'am, Karen Mitchell said, closing her notepad, filing false information with animal control is a serious offense. It wastes municipal resources and can result in healthy animals being euthanized unnecessarily. But I didn't know. Mrs. Patterson, ignorance of the law isn't a defense. You deliberately misrepresented the ownership status of this animal to municipal authorities. Karen Mitchell pulled out a yellow citation book and began writing. I'm issuing you a citation for providing false information to a municipal animal facility. The fine is $2,600. $2,600. Josie's voice cracked. Yes, ma'am. This is considered a first offense, so we're treating it as a warning rather than pursuing criminal charges. However, I strongly advise you to stay away from other people's pets in the future. Taking someone else's animal to a shelter under false pretenses could be considered theft. She handed Josie the yellow slip. You have 30 days to either pay the fine or contest it in municipal court. The information for doing either is on the back of the citation. Eric finally found his voice. Officers, surely this is just a family misunderstanding. Sir, Officer Williams interrupted gently, whether it's a family matter or not, false reporting to a municipal facility is a legal matter. The citation has been issued. Karen Mitchell packed up her clipboard. Mr. Patterson, I'm glad you were able to retrieve your dog quickly. These situations don't always end well. She looked pointedly at Josie. Ma'am, I strongly recommend you avoid interfering with other people's pets in the future. Officer Bradley handed me his business card. If you have any further issues, please don't hesitate to call. Have a good evening, folks. I walked them to the door, shook hands, thanked them for their professionalism. Through it all, I could feel Eric and Josie's eyes boring into my back like laser beams. When I closed the door and turned around, Josie was still staring at the yellow citation, her face chalk white. Eric looked like he'd been hit by a truck. I walked back to my chair, picked up my whiskey glass, and took a slow, appreciative sip. Well, I said pleasantly, that was educational. The silence after the officers left felt different from before, heavier, more final. Josie still clutched the yellow citation like it might disappear if she stared at it hard enough. Eric stood frozen by the window, watching the police car pull away, his face the color of old parchment. I settled back into my chair, savoring the last drops of whiskey, feeling Bella's warm weight against my leg as she curled up beside me. The crystal tumbler caught the lamplight, casting small rainbows on the coffee table. Everything felt sharper now, more vivid, like someone had just cleaned my glasses after years of looking through fog. Grant, Josie's voice cracked, and I looked up to see tears gathering in her eyes. Ah, here we go, I thought. Time for the waterworks. We can't pay this. $2,600, we don't have that kind of money. The desperation in her voice was almost musical. I'd heard variations of this tune for over a year now, always about money they didn't have, bills they couldn't pay, dreams they couldn't afford. But this time felt different. This time I wasn't reaching for my wallet. You have to help us, Eric said, his voice gaining strength as he turned away from the window. Dad, this is crazy. It's just a misunderstanding that got out of hand. I let out a small laugh, the sound surprising even me. It bubbled up from somewhere deep in my chest, carrying with it more than a year of suppressed frustration. Help you? I repeated, tasting the words like that excellent whiskey. That's interesting. Josie stepped closer, shifting Liam to her other hip. The baby was fussing now, sensing the tension in the room the way children always do. Please, we're family. We made a mistake, but we can't handle this kind of financial burden right now. Family. The word hung in the air between us like smoke. I watched her face carefully, the way her eyes darted between Eric and me, the slight tremor in her voice that suggested tears might start flowing any moment. She's good at this, I realized. She's had practice. Let me be very clear. I said, my voice calm as still water. I will never, not under any circumstances, pay 1 penny of that fine. That citation has your name on it, Josie. Your mistake, your consequence. Eric's face flushed red. Dad, how can you say that? After everything we've been through together. Everything we've been through, I interrupted, feeling something cold and sharp settling in my chest. You mean after I've supported you for over a year while you got back on your feet? After I turned my home into your personal charity case? After your wife threw away the last living piece of your mother like garbage? The words hit Eric like physical blows. I could see it in the way his shoulders sagged, the way his mouth opened and closed without sound. Beside him, Josie's expression was shifting from desperation to something harder, more calculating. Fine, she said, her voice taking on an edge I'd heard glimpses of before but never directed at me so openly. Be that way. But don't think this doesn't affect your relationship with your grandson. There it is, the threat I'd been waiting for, delivered with just enough sweetness to maintain plausible deniability. I felt something settle in my stomach. Not anger, exactly, but a kind of crystalline clarity that made everything suddenly simple. Is that a threat, Josie? It's reality, she shot back, her mask slipping further. Liam is our son. We decide who he spends time with. I looked at this woman, really looked at her, standing in my living room, holding my grandson, threatening to use him as a weapon against me. The fluorescent light from the kitchen caught the harsh lines around her mouth, lines I'd somehow missed during all those grateful smiles and sweet thank yous. I see, I said quietly, and stood up. Bella rose with me, alert to my mood. Well then, let me make something very clear to both of you. I walked to the window, looking out at the street where the police car had disappeared, feeling Eric and Josie's eyes tracking my movement. The neighborhood looked peaceful in the evening light, other families in other houses, living their lives without this particular brand of poison. You have two choices, I said, turning back to face them. Choice one, you stay here, under my roof, and we completely restructure this arrangement. You pay half the utilities, half the groceries, half the property insurance. You follow my rules in my house. You ask permission before making any decisions that affect my property or my life. Eric's mouth dropped open. Dad, we can't afford. Choice two, I continued, my voice cutting through his protest like a blade. You move out within the week. Find your own place, pay your own bills, live your own lives. The silence that followed was absolute. Even Liam had stopped fussing, as if sensing the weight of the moment. I could hear the old house settling around us, the soft tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway that Abigail had inherited from her grandmother. Josie's face had gone through several color changes, finally settling on a mottled red that clashed with her blonde hair. You're really going to do this? You're going to choose a dog over your family? Your family. Not our family. Your family. The distinction hit me like a revelation. She'd never considered herself part of my family, only entitled to its benefits. I'm not choosing anything, I said calmly. I'm simply offering you options, the same way you offered me options when you decided what to do with Bella. Eric stepped forward, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. This is insane, Dad. You're being a stubborn, principle-obsessed old man who... Yes, I interrupted, surprised by how good it felt to agree. Yes, I am. Funny how principles matter when they're inconvenient for you. For over a year, I'd bent my principles like wet clay, accommodating their needs, their schedules, their comfort. I'd watch them redecorate my living room, eat food I paid for without thanks, use my utilities like they owned the place, all while telling myself it was temporary, that family comes first. But principles were like bones. Bend them too far and they snap back with surprising force. Josie shifted Liam again, her movements sharp and agitated. Fine. You want to be that way? We'll figure it out ourselves. We'd rather scrape by on our own than live under your ridiculous rules. Ridiculous rules. Like paying for what you use, like not lying to government officials, like not disposing of other people's beloved pets. And don't think we'll come crawling back, Eric added, his voice rising. When you're sitting in this big empty house all alone, remember that you chose this. Alone. The word should have stung. Instead, it sounded like a promise. I looked around my living room and tried to imagine it without their constant presence, their constant needs, their constant judgment. The idea filled me with anticipation. Oh, Eric, I said softly. I won't be alone. I'll have Bella. I'll have my memories of your mother. I'll have my peace. What exactly do you think I'll be missing? I watched both their faces as they processed it, saw the moment when they realized I wasn't calling their bluff. I genuinely preferred the alternative they were threatening me with. Josie's composure finally cracked. You'll regret this, she hissed. All pretense gone. When we're gone and you realize what you've lost, what I've lost? I interrupted, feeling something hot flaring in my chest. Let me tell you what I've lost, Josie. I've lost over a year of retirement savings, supporting two adults who couldn't contribute a single dollar. I've lost the peaceful home my wife and I built together. I've lost respect for my own son, watching him stand by while his wife treated me like an ATM. Eric flinched, but I wasn't finished. I've lost sleep, worrying about your futures while you made no effort to secure them yourselves. I've lost the simple pleasure of coming home to my own space, and today, I nearly lost the last living connection to the woman I loved most in this world. Liam started to whimper in Josie's arms, and the sound broke through my anger. This wasn't about him. But you know what I found today? I said, my voice dropping. I found my limits. I found my backbone. I found out that there are some things I won't sacrifice. no matter how much family guilt gets piled on top. I reached down and scratched Bella behind her ears, feeling her tail thump against my leg. She looked up at me with those trusting brown eyes that had comforted me through the darkest nights of grief. "That works perfectly for me," I said, and meant every word. I picked up the empty whiskey tumbler, cradling it like a trophy. The crystal was still warm from the excellent Glenfiddich flavors of celebration, of marking significant moments. This felt like the most significant moment I'd had in years. Outside, Mrs. Henderson's porch light came on across the street. She'd been widowed for 5 years now, and every time I talked to her, she'd seemed content. Not lonely, but peacefully content with her own life, her own choices. For the first time, I understood what she'd been trying to tell me. The evening was drawing in, painting my living room in shades of gold and amber. The grandfather clock chimed 7 times. For the first time in over a year, my house felt like it belonged to me again. "One week," I said pleasantly, settling back into my chair with Bella curled warm against my leg. "I think that's more than fair." Eric and Josie exchanged one last look, desperation, anger, disbelief that their comfortable arrangement was really ending. Then they turned and headed for the stairs, Liam's soft crying fading as they climbed. I sat in the gathering dusk, listening to my house settling around me, the soft tick of the clock, the whisper of heat through the vents, Bella's contented breathing. These were the sounds of my real life, the life I'd almost forgotten. Tomorrow, I would call Abigail's parents and invite them for dinner. We could look through those photo albums, share stories, maybe take Bella for a walk. Simple pleasures, quiet connections, the kind of life my wife would have wanted for me, the kind of life I was finally ready to claim. To hear the next story, click the box on the left. And as always, thank you for watching.